So let's talk about the effects of chest breathing. So what happens when you only breathe into your chest? You start ignoring the midsection and definitely the lower section of your lungs, which means that the diaphragm, the primary muscle that is responsible for breathing, is not working correctly. It's offline. So the secondary muscles have to take over and compensate, such as the neck muscles here in the scalenes, the elevated scapula, the upper trapezius. Because when you take a deep breath into the chest, your shoulders will rise. So the chest has to expand, the intercostal muscle have to pull the ribs apart, and also the neck muscles and the shoulder muscles, they have to kind of rise to create space for the lungs to expand upwards, which is not a problem if you do this every now and then. However, we breathe 15 times per minute, which adds up to more than 20,000 times per day and more than 8 million times a year. So year after year, we can definitely develop chronic shoulder pain or neck pain. The chest breathing have several knock-on consequences, such as low back pain, pelvic floor dysfunction. When the diaphragm moves down, it creates intra-abdominal pressure. And if this pressure is not there, the lower back is not supported properly. And also, the pelvic diaphragm, it doesn't get that massage, the toning that it requires. That will lead to, or could lead to constipation, because the peristaltic movement is compromised. The diaphragm is not moving up and down, not massaging the internal organs. So that could lead to poor circulation. So the lymph and the venous blood doesn't return to the heart as it should, which can later lead to inertia, dullness, fatigue, even depression. And when we breathe mainly into the chest, then we ignore the lower compartments, which means we take in smaller amount of oxygen, which means we need to breathe more faster. And then there's a direct link between fast, shallow breathing and anxiety. Why is that so? What happens when you get anxious or nervous or angry? Your breath becomes shallow and rapid. Your heart rate goes up. So your mood or your state of mind affects the way you breathe. However, it is true vice versa. So the way you breathe can affect how you feel. So simply just by breathing into your chest, you can actually switch on the sympathetic nervous system, the stress response, simply by breath alone. So if that is possible, it is possible to switch it off by the breath. Absolutely. So let me tell you how it works. So our nervous system can be divided into voluntary nervous system and involuntary nervous system. So voluntary nervous system is responsible for moving the muscles. If you want, you can stretch out your arms, you can pick up objects, you could stand up or walk away or run or jump or any of these basic movements that you want to do that is driven by the voluntary nervous system. However, you are unable to control your heart. You're unable to control your peristaltic movement, your body temperature. So that belongs to the autonomic nervous system that is run by an autonomic or program kind of like nervous system. It is an automatic program that runs by itself. So you don't have to think about it, any of these movements, and basically the body just takes care of itself. The involuntary nervous system can be divided into two other subcategories. The sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight and flight mode, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for relaxation and regeneration. So let's assume you go for a hike in the woods and you get attacked by a bear. So once your mind perceives an approaching danger, immediately a rush of energy being mobilized, and it's going to be available to you to either run or fight for your life. So you start running away from the bear, and let's say you get away, and after half an hour, the parasympathetic tone will kick in and it will bring your body back to calmness. However, if you're unable to outrun the bear, then you have to find some other mode of getting away from it. So you may climb up a tree. And then once the bear gets there, it is also trying to come up, but let's say it is unable to. But the bear is really hungry, so it decides to wait for you down there. So your stress response won't be able to switch off. It will be prolonged. And it is very adaptive. Every animal in nature has the ability to tolerate short-term stress. However, if the stress response becomes prolonged, we begin to live in a constant state of survival. And in the survival state, there is no time to regenerate, there's no time to rest, there is no time to heal. So what happens once the stress response kicks in? Basically, your pupil dilutes, your digestion shuts down, the immune system is suppressed, and all the blood from the internal organs is pressed towards the extremities, so you are able to do extreme activities or any kind of activity that is responsible for your survival. However, you do need time to recharge this extra amount of energy that has been utilized and used. So we do need to be able to rest and come back to equilibrium. However, what if we are unable to do that because we constantly perceive some sort of a danger? What if it is not a bear that is waiting for you at the bottom of this tree? What if it is your boss, or an abusive spouse, maybe unemployment, or really strict deadlines, or even just slow internet or crazy traffic? Even the smallest amount of stress can knock us out of balance, and it is very adaptive, so the body can get used to this rush of chemicals such as cortisol and adrenaline that is rushing into the bloodstream when we feel stressed. So the body can get used to it, and after a while, it will begin to crave and subconsciously create situations when we feel stressful. Just like a drug addict, we will need a bad job or a poor relationship. So how can we get out of this vicious cycle? How can we reset our nervous system? How to get out from the fight and flight mode? It's really simple. We just have to start paying attention to our breath and switch on the diaphragm, which is normally offline in most people. Follow me across the next video, and I will show you how to activate the diaphragm and the abdominal breathing. Before we move into the deep abdominal breathing, let me share with you two really amazing studies done on breathwork and their effect on mental health and emotions specifically. The first study was done by an American psychologist, and he was interested in the effect of breathing on emotions. So he had a study group and he asked them to feel really intense emotions, such as anger, anxiety, depression, fear, love, happiness. And while they were going through these emotions, they were studying their breath patterns. They were noticing how fast they were breathing, how many breaths they took per minute, how deep the breaths were, what was their rhythm. And they were starting noting down certain patterns related to certain emotions. And then once the study was done, they got a completely new group of people and they asked them to breathe in a certain way that were identified previously. And then after the breathing exercise, they were asked how did they feel. And they were up for a big surprise because people were able to recall the very exact emotion that was related to the exact breath pattern they were practicing. So this is a big breakthrough because it proves that emotions and breathing are strongly related. So breath can affect our emotions and our emotions can affect our breath. You will need to lay down your back for this one and grab either a yoga block or a book. I'm going to use a book because as assumed that not all of you will have a block, and I just prefer to demonstrate with something that is accessible to anyone. Book of answers, just in case if you have any questions. So first just watch me. Let me demonstrate what I would like you to do so you can fully understand. So we just need to place the book on the belly button, keeping the feet about hip width, shoulders relaxed, hands either resting on your thighs, or you can just keep them by your side. And then as you take a deep inhale through the nose, focus on drawing the air all the way down towards the diaphragm. And then lift the block up as you inhale. On the exhale, allow the block to sink. Inhale, lift up. Exhale, allow it to sink. Inhale. Exhale. So you can see my belly is rising on the inhale, and on the exhale, it is going down. My chest is not moving whatsoever. So once I feel that the belly is full, then I begin to exhale. So I don't continue to inhale, because I could still inhale, but then I will start using also the upper compartments of my lungs. So for now, I just really want to compartmentalize the breath and really focus on the deep abdominal breathing. It is your turn now. So go and grab a block or just a book and then lay down on the back. Put up the feet, keep them about hip width, relax the face, relax your shoulders. Place the hands either on the thighs or by your side, and then place the block or the book up on the belly button. And begin to breathe nice and slow. Feel your breath. And then begin to concentrate on the abdominal breathing. So as you take a deep breath, try to lift the block up. On the exhale, allow the block to sink. On the inhale, let the block rise. On the exhale, let the block sink. And just continue with this simple exercise. Inhale, lifting the block. Exhale, allowing it to sink. Just continue with this. Let's do 15 repetitions. Why 15? Once you repeat something 15 times, you create new neural pathways. Why is that important? Because the breath is governed by the involuntary nervous system. So you don't have to pay attention to your breath. The breath is going automatically. So we already have a habit. So now we are trying to create a new habit once you start engaging the diaphragm, and it is included in the breathing. So you start breathing deeply into the abdomen, and then by doing that, you start contracting the diaphragm. It begins to move downwards towards the abdominal content, and then it will push the belly out. On the exhale, the belly will sink. Just continue with this. And if you feel this is really challenging for you, then it means that your diaphragm haven't been really in use. So now it is your time to strengthen these muscles. Take a couple of more breaths. So now if you are able to lift the belly button up and down, then just remove the block. And then continue to breathe the same way. Inhale, try to lift the belly button up. On the exhale, let the belly button sink. If you found that you couldn't still get it completely right, don't worry, just continue with the block. So inhale, try to lift. Exhale, allow it to sink. Inhale, belly comes up. Exhale, belly goes down. And just continue with your own breath. Notice if you want to breathe into your chest, try to avoid it. Only focus on deep abdominal breathing. Nice and slow, just go with your own rhythm. Feel your breath and notice what muscles you are engaging right now. How do you push the belly up? What kind of muscles are involved? Try to remember. Create that new synaptic connections in the brain. Once you begin to breathe deeply, you start exercising your diaphragm. And the diaphragm is just another muscle that needs to contract as it goes down. The same way your biceps has to contract when you lift something up. So you can strengthen your muscles by lifting weights or doing certain exercises. But how often do we do breath exercises? Not very often, so these muscles can get really weak, and if you have trouble doing these simple breathings, that means that you need to strengthen even more these muscles to become activated, strong, and they are going to do the major work of breathing. So after finishing the 15 breaths, remove the block if it is still on your belly and close the eyes and simply begin to observe how you feel. Notice what's happening. Do you feel calmer? Do you feel more agitated? Maybe you don't feel any difference whatsoever. So whatever it might be, simply just pay attention to that. There's no right or wrong. Usually people feel a bit more relaxed or even slightly lightheaded because we were taking some deep abdominal breaths. When you release a lot more carbon dioxide and you take in an excess amount of oxygen. So you could feel slightly lightheaded. Take a couple of more deep breaths and then slowly open the eyes and come up to a seated position. And in the next exercise we are going to do the very same thing. Inhale, deep abdominal breath, focusing on pushing the belly out. On the exhale, drawing the belly inwards. Inhale, belly comes out. Exhale, belly goes in. If you feel you don't quite get this right just yet, then just go back to laying down on the floor, put the feet up and do the same thing until you are able to really control the diaphragm. And then once you are able to do that comfortably, then it's time to sit up and then do the same thing. So you have to be able to get this right because this is the foundation of all the breath work. You have to be able to access the diaphragm and activate it and work with that correctly. Otherwise, if our foundation is weak, then we won't be able to build a strong house on top of that. And breath work is really a powerful technique, so it is crucial to do it correctly. Otherwise, we could also create imbalance. So our purpose is to create balance in the body. However, if breath work is done incorrectly, it could also create disturbances, and we want to avoid that. So just continue breathing into the abdomen. And feel that muscle engagement that is related to the diaphragm. Slow, steady breathing. Feel your diaphragm moving. Belly comes out, belly goes in. Take a few more breaths. And again, just close the eyes for just 1 minute. So take a couple of more breaths and slowly open the eyes. I would like you to practice these techniques as long as you need to get a really smooth diaphragmatic movement. It's really important because it will be the fundamental technique of all the other breath work, so you have to be able to use the diaphragm. Otherwise, if you don't have a strong foundation, it will be really difficult to progress any further. So just take your time, take this seriously. If you felt it was really difficult for you, maybe take a day, several days, maybe a week, and then progress, maybe leaving the block, just doing the exercise while laying down, and then once you are able to sit up, do the same thing. Practice these breaths at least 15 times each, or maybe for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then sit silently for a little bit and just observe what is happening. In the next video, I'm going to tell you more about how we can increase our lifespan simply just by reducing the number of breaths we take. Join me in the next video. Hope hope to see you there.